Hey, as the Verizon guy used to say, can you hear me now?
Hey!
Sorry for the tech glitch. We're radio people. What do you want? There's a camera. Can you hear us now?
Is that it?
No, that's the old one, isn't it?
Oh, that's not good.
We're live.
We were live. Refresh that. Can you? Hello?
Hello.
All right. Let's see if we're back in action.
We're just making sure we're going before we talk too much.
Alright.
There we go. That should be it.
Alright.
Wait, no.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Can you guys hear us? Yep. Got it. Yes. Jennifer,
All right.
Mike, Maynard, thank you guys for your patience.
Thanks. Sorry about that.
We value your time. We know you got stuff to do. Thank you, Rob.
Sorry
so
about
go
that,
ahead.
guys.
You were revealing the last.
So yeah, okay, so really quick, for today's overtime, we're doing something a little different. We're going to debrief the show today because God took us somewhere we didn't necessarily know we were going to end up. Big picture being, we're so brokenhearted about political divide right now, and there seems to be no hope. And so we wanted to rediscover the radical command to what it means to love your neighbor / love your enemy.
Right.
When it really hurts, because too often I think Christian radio, Christian ministry makes it sound so easy. It's like, you know, if your friend is mean, you've got to love them anyway, and they're still your friend. Or
Yeah.
if some abstract situation happens, you still love them. But what about when someone who's close to you thinks you're crazy about something as intimate for you? Your story about racism.
Right.
Like, how can you love somebody who thinks you're totally wrong that race is a thing?
Right. And so that's what made it for me more complex. Because saying love your enemy is like, okay, great.
Yeah.
They're not even in your circle, so you can just pray for them. It's kind of like, to me, I find it a little easier to pray. It's kind of like loving difficult family members. I know y'all are there. They're hard. You can't say, I'm not going to see you ever again. You know, like that's hard.
But it's easier to love them if they live in another city.
Exactly, yes. So what does it look like to love someone
Who hurts you?
who hurts you? And so with something like racism, it's something that as a person of color you live and walk through every day. Not like racist acts, but dodging it and mindful of it, and you know, it's your reality. You can't just take it off, or you can't say, well, I just won't share that I'm a person of color. So to have someone dismiss that and say that's not even a thing makes it uncomfortable. It makes it difficult to keep that person in an intimate relationship with me. So my question was on the show, okay, so what does it look like to love a person like that? If I called that person 10 times a week before I found out that they had that view and don't feel like calling them 10 times a week anymore, is that okay? Should I still, you know, hang with you the way I used to? Or is that not really loving the way a Christian should?
Look at Tanks.
What's he saying?
So I fixed it, Team Tanks.
Team Tanks.
With his muscles.
Kelly fixed it, Tanks, not you. You pointed it out first.
Well, that's true.
Thank you for that. Tanks.
So we had several people join and say, yeah, you love your enemy, you love those you disagree with. Some people said they didn't grow up with racism or race even being an issue in their family, but their eyes have been opened the more and more they've lived. And then we kind of ended the show with you saying and highlighting there still is hope, even in the political climate. That was how you started this song.
But it requires a radical rediscovery of just how counterintuitive the command is. Like I mentioned before, I think one of the reasons God called Paul was to give us the most extreme possible example of loving your enemy. He literally tried to kill Christians and was holding everybody's coat when they killed Stephen. You know, and then he became one of the greatest advocates for the faith. That's loving your enemy, loving Saul.
Yeah.
That's why it sounds crazy when you really think about it. But when Paul himself writes in Romans 12, if your enemy's hungry, just think of that person that drives you nuts, that hurts you personally.
Yeah.
They're hungry. What do? Feed them. What does your flesh want to do? Good. Glad you're hungry. That's how I feel when I'm around you. That doesn't feel good, does it? You know, see what I mean?
Yeah.
That's crazy.
Mike says, it's wrong to say it isn't a thing for those who are not racist. and it's wrong to blame everyone for being racist. Yes.
As
it's
in
true.
blame everyone.
Like
right.
to say all white people or
Right.
yeah.
But there are some who definitely are racist. There's,
Right.
Yeah.
As long,
Okay,
as long
yeah.
as we validate. I love that someone texted in and said, not only did she say her eyes were being opened up, but she said she even acknowledged that there's subtle prejudice.
Yeah.
That's the thing. Now it's harder than before. Before it was like, oh, you use the N-word, or you know, like
Even though that still
whereas-
happens.
It still happens.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
shared how it happened to me 2 years ago in Kent. But it's the subtle stuff that makes it difficult. And then when you're already kind of like, it's already mentally and spiritually exhausting to then have people dismiss that and be like, no, it's not a thing. Just like my friend was saying, then it makes you feel even crazier. Like, what? You know, it brings you peace to have people affirm and say, yes, that's wrong, and call it out. But then we shared this text, Brian, respectfully disagreeing with Brian. This is a fallen world and Satan is busy. There are people in this country and in politics who do hate America. And then you and I kind of were saying, well, there are those who
Yes
hate
and no.
America. And go ahead.
Well, yeah, it's a yes and no. I think the person who legitimately hates America and wants to destroy it would be like a radical anarchist.
Yeah.
Would you agree with this? Somebody who literally thinks that government is bad and they want to destroy it, and that America's an evil place. That's one thing. Yes, that exists. But I think what we've done is we've taken that category and we've widened it to say someone who's been hurt by America and points out a flaw in America doesn't hate America. It's possible to be mad and mad at it or hurt by America and still be patriotic and love it.
Absolutely.
Which is like the same way that it's possible to be hurt by your friend who denies racism exists, but still accept the command to love that person.
Right.
Those seem like they're incompatible, and yet they aren't. They are
Right.
compatible.
Right. One example I used was with my siblings. My sisters were born 10 years after me. And so my experience as a child was just different, slightly different. And if you have siblings, you kind of get what I'm saying. So some of my issues with my parents, they don't get and they don't understand. We all love our parents, but we can't judge each other in terms of how we engage or how we struggle with issues because they didn't live the things I lived. What are your thoughts with Rod? He says racism, racist have become buzzwords utilized by people that don't desire to effectively dialogue.
As in, it's the, what do they call it?
Quantaya, it's been a while.
Dog whistle.
I'm sorry, she just showed up.
The what?
Dog whistle words.
Yeah, or like the trump cards, or it's like you shut down discussion by putting that on the table.
Yeah,
Right? That's what
Okay.
the accusation would be, right?
yeah,
You don't want to really talk about an issue, so you throw down, well, you're a racist.
and then
So,
just-
okay,
yeah.
first question on that would be, are there people, let's just say, are there Afro-Dominicans who will play the race card to shut down a conversation when there is no race?
I'm sure. I mean, there are people.
Right.
Yeah,
Does that mean everyone's doing it then?
no,
No.
Not at
No.
all.
No. So, yes and no. I think here's part of the problem, I think, and it has to do with what Mike made a good point. This is what I was going to say that connects to Rod's comment.
this one.
Mike says it's wrong to say that racism isn't a thing for those who are not racist, and it's wrong to blame everyone for being racist. But here's, I think, the problem with this discussion in America today. If you were to say, listen, America has got major race issues today, for example, X, Y, and Z, then white Brian goes, but it's not me.
Right.
Is that helpful?
No,
Well, didn't say it was me. You didn't say it was me.
you're right.
What you're looking for is for me to not go, well, I didn't do it.
Yeah,
You're looking for me to go, oh man, yeah. That's horrible that happened to you, and
Yeah.
I'm not okay with that.
yeah.
Like, you don't need me to tell you it's not me. You're not
No.
saying it's me.
It's right.
You're not saying it's
and
everyone.
then what it does is it flips the conversation. Now instead of affirming the person that experienced racism, now that person's affirming you. No,
Yeah.
you're not racist, and so it flips the whole thing.
It actually saying, well, I'm not a racist, destroys the conversation just as much.
Yeah, yeah.
Because it forces you to go, well, okay, well, what is racism? You seem like a great guy. Like that's distracting from it.
Yeah.
It doesn't help if I go, well, I'm not. Nobody said I was.
Right. Right.
Do you see?
And you can prove that you're not by stepping into dialogue with the person who is being victimized by the racism and say, show me what you go through. Help me to understand it better. And then you're empathizing there. And you may, in fact, find that even though you think you're not a racist, you're doing things that are racist every day. And it's like just part of your routine. You don't realize it.
I mean, yeah, and we're working on stuff. But I love what you said about having a teachable spirit. And even the attitude of not feeling like you got to solve anything. Like my friends who are Caucasian who like get it, they're just amazing. Just like Brian. She doesn't come with solutions. You know, it's just listening. Like just
but it's a
listening.
she.
Well,
I think it's hard for men. We
Yeah,
want to come
well,
in and fix things.
That's true. But we have to understand, like, if that's your thing where you feel, you gotta know, this is bigger than you. Like, especially in this issue.
Yeah, it's not about you.
It's not about
Were
you.
you around in slavery? You weren't. So calm down.
Right.
Like, no one's saying you caused this.
So it takes pressure
Right.
off of you. You can listen to your friend
Yeah.
and not feel like, well, I got to justify or I got to help her solve this. No, just listen. Just validate. Even if it doesn't make any sense to you because you've never lived it, just listening and validating their feelings is good enough.
And guess what? It's biblical. Because when did it all break down for Job's friends and Job? When they stopped mourning with him and started saying stuff.
Yeah.
Like, they were doing well when they just sat there with him. This is why it multiple times, weep with those who weep. What did Jesus do when he encounters Mary and Martha, who are devastated that Lazarus is dead? He doesn't go, would you get over it? Don't you know who I am?
Yeah.
You know, I didn't do this.
Yeah.
He wept.
And so
He
part
wept with them.
of our point with this conversation was how do you engage then with people who disagree and how do you love them? Right? Because it's bigger than race. We landed on race. Just so people know, we're not just talking about race and just trying to prove that racism exists.
Right.
It's the how do
Because
you
if you don't believe that today, we're not going to convince you.
yeah, we're sure not. It's how do you engage with those people, because what we're doing now is we're tribal. And so we can do that too. Oh, you don't agree with me that it's racist, and so you just shut people out. And I don't want to do that. You know, and even the friend I told you that's like, it's not a thing. I'm finding myself growing apart from that person. And I'm like, ooh, is that bad? Is that not loving? Should I cover it up by saying, well, I'm praying for her? Or do you still engage? Yvonne says, I'm so disturbed when my students think every comment pertaining to cultural differences are racist.
And if I'm not mistaken, based on your profile picture, you're African American.
Yes, she is African American. Yeah.
What's your reaction to that?
I think we do need to, that is a thing with anybody.
So-
you know, especially
so-
children, where you have to help them, right? Understand what is real racism, what is like somebody just being mean.
Yeah, and so that goes to Rod and Mike's points that sometimes it's used incorrectly. And it's important to admit that as well.
But it
right?
doesn't eliminate all the other correct things. Like
Yeah,
correct ways of saying it.
Yeah.
So the existence of someone calling something racist that isn't doesn't negate all racist things.
Right.
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 There you go. Okay, fair enough.
And there's
my-
bias.
Right.
I remember my kids used to say, like, oh, you're being racist against Mountain Dew or something, you know, whatever. And I'd be like, no, that's not the right
It's a
word.
soda.
It's biased. And there's all kinds of biases. But I think people, they get caught up with that word racist, and it's been thrown around so much that they misapply it to a lot of things.
Sure.
But
Good point.
Right.
it
There's
has a
bias.
specific-
You're right. There's prejudice. You know, thinking because I look a certain way, I'm going to behave a certain way. Correct me if I'm wrong. But that's not necessarily racist. That's just you're stereotyping and it's prejudice. Racist to me is more of the get out.
I hate you because of your ethnicity.
Yeah.
Yeah,
You're
that.
right.
Yeah. So I think those happen. Maybe I'm being too optimistic. Less than the prejudice, the stereotypes.
But see, it's
I don't
not
know.
just the negative. This is what I would teach my students too, that racism isn't just the negative. If I were to say to you, wow, oh, you're Afro-Dominican, you must be great at basketball because you're black.
That's not
That's
good.
what
That's
I thought,
racist.
too.
Yeah.
And I go, well, I'm being nice. I'm saying you must be good at
I
something.
bet you're a good dancer. Actually, no.
You must run real fast.
Yes. No,
That's
yeah,
that
it's
extra
true.
muscle.
I'm
Yeah.
being nice, Janelle.
Yeah.
I'm being a really nice racist.
Right.
Do you see? Do you see? Like,
Yeah.
Yes.
Tank says prejudice is racism. Prejudice, discrimination, or antagonism directed against someone of a different race based on the belief that one's own race is superior. I guess I'm going
Even to the
back
positive.
to, I'm going back to a conversation I had with teachers at my school. They were like the only 2 black teachers in my school. Everybody was white. And we were talking, they were awesome teachers. They were interns from Brown University. And we were discussing racism, and maybe some people disagree with this, but they were saying how black people can't be racist. They may be wrong. I mean, they were just teachers, but they were saying racism involves a power dynamic. You need power to be racist. That's why I was like, well, prejudice is like stereotype. Is that getting too?
I've
I
written
just
about
don't want to
this.
call everything racism.
Because
There's
I
some
gotta
things
tell you.
that's just like,
From my experience in white culture, okay, because it is a thing. It's not racist to say that. There's a stumbling block. Like you saying that there's no such thing as black people being racist is an
black
obstacle.
people can be prejudiced. That's what they said.
And
I'm
see-
telling you what my teacher
And see,
said.
now we're dismantling someone's whole position and their feeling by just saying words differently.
Okay.
Here's what I'm trying, and I made a point in my piece about this, and Tanks defended me years ago. I remember this because people misunderstood me. So I'm living on the south side of Chicago. There's no white people for miles, and we're waiting at the stoplight, and I think it was around 71st Street, 79th Street, something like that, where Louis Farrakhan's Nation of Islam, like Temple Miriam, is like right there. There's African American dudes in like 3-piece suits passing out. I forget the name of the paper, but Farrakhan's paper. And I'm sitting there in my minivan with my white kids and my white wife, and everybody else got a newspaper. And when they got to my car, these guys totally ignored that I existed.
Oh, wow.
So, was that racist? You see what I'm saying? Like, there
Right.
was this prejudice / racist against me because I'm white.
Yeah.
They avoided me.
Yeah.
Okay, now, to say that doesn't happen is a lie. That happens. It happened to me. One time, Sarah was followed around in the store because she was the only white lady in it. And they thought she was probably going to take something.
That's funny.
It's funny.
Not funny. It's like funny because it's like, what?
She was
That's
at the Sears.
yeah.
If you've been to Chicago, she was at the Sears on 79th and Stony when that used to be open. She got followed around by security because they're like, what is she doing here? She's probably going to steal
crazy.
something. Now, I bring all that up because my analogy would be me getting all bent out of shape about that situation is like me complaining to a guy in the middle of a car wreck who lost his leg and he's bleeding and about to die about my paper cut.
That's what I'm saying. First, I want to call
My
out.
paper cut exists, but by degrees of severity has absolutely nothing to do with the guy in the car wreck.
That's what I'm saying. For them to skip you and not give you the newspaper is so drastically different than having the power to keep jobs from people.
And that's what I'm trying to say.
Oppression. Racism is oppressing.
So we can
They
get somewhere
like-
further, Janelle. What I'm trying to say is we can get somewhere further if we acknowledge the paper cut. If someone needs you to
Okay.
acknowledge their boo-boo.
Okay. No, yeah.
It's like your kids. They fall down and there's not even blood. But until you acknowledge that they're hurt,
Oh, yeah. Then,
like
yeah.
you're not gonna be able to talk to them. It's
Yeah.
like, oh, you cut a boo boo, and I hate to say it like that, but that's what it is. It's a paper cut. Reverse racism is a paper cut. It's a boo boo. Okay. So acknowledge it. Yeah, you're right. That happens.
And it's
Brian
wrong,
got treated
right,
bad by
right.
not getting, as Robert said, the final call from the Nation of Islam. But you feel better now? Okay. Now let's talk about real, serious,
Hello.
different universe type race issues.
Tank says the reason we say that is because racism hinders on feeling superior over, and then he said that's the definition with Oxford.
And those guys thought they were superior over me.
Yeah, no.
That's Nation of Islam ideology.
Listen, when okay, I may be wrong, and I'm just over here just talking for
I may
myself.
be crazy, but it just
When
may be a
my
lunatic you're looking for.
When
Yeah.
my girls or my kids are in a park and they have an interaction that's like racist kind of thing, that has a tone of racism, to have behind you as a white young man, the system, like the power, like just the visual of just everything in terms of society is a different feel that when you're approaching my son, my black son. It's
Yeah.
just the feel is different.
Well, and
you can never like.
you know,
My
I'm
son
agreeing with
could
you, right?
treat a white kid differently because he's in a park full of black kids, and the dynamic, the systematic dynamic is never the same. The superiority, you can never overcome that as an individual ever.
Yeah, and I hope you hear me saying I agree with you, because I had my kids in parks on the south side of Chicago where there were a couple of times where they were the only white kids there and they were treated poorly because of their race. And yet I'm still the guy saying
It
that's
exists.
nothing compared to what
Oh, yeah, yeah.
you experience.
Yeah.
Because there isn't the power structure behind it.
Right.
So I'm agreeing with you.
Okay.
But
Yeah.
I'm
But we
saying that
have
we
to
don't
validate
get
it.
anywhere by
Yeah.
invalidating the idea
Right.
that the opposite exists.
I
That
have
destroys the
to
argument.
call out Montina. This is like awesome.
Yeah,
She says,
right?
you can read it. Go ahead.
Okay, she says, I'm hearing you guys for the first time in my car today. I heard about the live and I had to join in. I'm liking the show. Great topic.
That is
All right,
awesome.
Martina.
Love you, girl.
We love doing stuff
This is
for new
Martina,
people.
y'all. We see your picture. You look good.
All right.
So that's what's weird about Facebook. She's like, "What? You're looking at my picture?
I
That's
know.
creepy." No, we like to do nice stuff for new people. So here's what I want you to do, Martina. I want you to reach out to us by message, because we got some stuff for you. Okay, so message us
Yeah.
after this is done, and we'll talk to you.
Yes, please, please, please.
Please do.
Quantaya says yes. Michelle says she likes your story. Jennifer says, but sometimes it turns from acknowledging the paper cut to coddling the individual because they have a paper cut.
That's exactly that's my point, Jennifer. It's like, let's call it what it is. Say it exists so we can move on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But if I've got a paper cut and you're dying in a car wreck, like, I gotta shut up about my paper cut for us to move anywhere.
Yeah. Your mom says, hi, our mom,
Yo
says
mama.
it was also, she says she attended high school in the 60s. There was one black student in my school. Combine that with the era. And then she says it was also the hippie free love era. I think people of my era have a struggle between how we were raised and our desire to not be racist. This came up actually in a awesome group that's in my church.
Thanks, Mom.
She is awesome.
Aw.
That's where all the intelligence comes from, y'all.
Yep.
From Miss
True.
Jandy. So, the question came up at my church in this group I'm a part of. That was like, why is it that white people are uncomfortable talking about race? Good people, like we're not even talking about the people that are part of the
That's true.
problem. And part of what surfaced was because they feel like they're being called racist. So it's like kind of like your mom said, if you have good intentions and you're like, yo, that was not me, then you get defensive and you shut it down, and maybe that's what makes people kind of react like, no, that's not a thing.
But you realize part of current dialogue is implicit bias. And so one of the more sophisticated discussions of racial issues in America today has to do with the fact that you may not realize it, but you actually do harbor some racist ideas, even though you don't want to.
Can you explain that? Because some people may not even go there of like, what, me? I'm not racist. So what would it look like if you're not even intentional about it?
Like you going, oh yeah, this is terrible what's happening African Americans in this country, we need more equality. And then you drive down the street and you see black teenagers on the corner and you lock your door.
Yeah.
Unless, what if you would have seen any group of teenagers, you would
Oh,
lock
yes.
your door.
Now, what
Yes.
I'm saying is,
Yeah.
compare that to, there's a group of white kids on their bikes in the corner, you're not gonna, like having a great time. A group of black kids on their bikes in the corner, if you still lock your door, you got some issues to deal with.
Yeah.
Or the issue of even acknowledging the idea that the generational destruction that came out of not just slavery, but Jim Crow and up until the early 1960s has generational consequence. And just the existence of being part of the majority culture that didn't experience that gives advantage.
Yeah.
That's what people are very uncomfortable with, because that's still, at its core, saying it's your fault. Isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah.
Right?
But that's the subtle stuff that maybe people can miss and be like, what?
But I think
That's
we
not
need to
racist.
acknowledge.
Racist is the N-word, and racist is...
Well, I know what you're saying, but don't we have to acknowledge that in some sense, we are saying it's your fault?
Yeah. Yeah.
So what do we do with that?
Ron?
Is it wrong to say that? Even if you didn't mean it. Like if I make Sarah cry and I didn't mean to, is it still my fault?
I can see people reacting and saying, look, I wasn't even born during Jim Crow. How can you say it's my fault? So maybe it's society's fault. But that then kind of makes it easy to pass on it. I think if you want to make progress on racism, we as, let me just say, as white Christians, if you think you're not racist at all or whatever, sit down with a friend who's, whether it's African American or perhaps another race, you know, in some minority, and ask them what their life's like in that regard.
Yeah.
And you'll find out some of the things they go through, and then you'll be empathetic and hopefully help to make some changes.
Am I crazy by highlighting what some people say based on your question, and it's you're benefiting from what happened in the past? You as a white man benefit from the privilege that happened in the past. It doesn't make you guilty, but you to act like
Or malicious.
Yeah.
But the anger comes from to act like, well, you're in America. You have opportunities just like I do. Seriously? Like, the whole system is set up for you to succeed. The whole system.
Well, there are...
And to just be like, well, it's just me, Brian, my individual Brian. No, like, we have to acknowledge the overall picture.
Yeah. There are cases, and I'm sure a lot of people would jump to this and say, well, look, the black athlete in basketball dominates the stardom of it. The last that I can think of, the last white superstar was a guy from Germany. He wasn't an American.
See, I was thinking Larry Bird, but I guess I'm not up to date.
That would go even farther back. Yeah.
God.
So and these guys, you know, the athletes step up and instant millionaires, multi-millionaires many times over. But that's out of the whole of society. That's a pretty small niche.
Yeah.
And you can't just say, okay, well, see, there's a perfect example. They've made it.
Yeah.
Well, they did.
Let me give you one example. Redlining with real estate.
You need to define that.
No, you do that because you're better at it. You're a history teacher.
Well, it'd be like realtors
Brian.
not showing, for instance, black couples who want to buy a house, showing them certain neighborhoods but not other neighborhoods because, well, they just wouldn't fit in there.
Yes.
Well, it's also tied to white flight you're talking about, right? But why
Yes.
don't you?
For example, what happened in East Cleveland? East Cleveland, there's like a whole. It's on Euclid Boulevard. All of that used to be the Millionaire
Road.
Road, yeah. And there was white flight, and now you got East Cleveland being what it is, and what happened to the housing market there. It's happened throughout the United States, but even how Black Americans have been held back from owning. That's besides centuries of slavery. Being held back from home ownership. And just as a couple, me and Len, you put, like, our parents never owned a home. The whole, like, just to catch up in terms of just knowledge. Our kids are going to be the first generation of kids that are like 18 we're going to be even able to sit down and talk about, okay, this is how you do credit. This is what you do with a down payment. Our parents were clueless. So you can't dismiss generations of lack of knowledge, empowerment, connections, relationships, and how it debilitates financial growth, you know?
Yeah, compare it to my family story where my parents owned a home, my grandparents both sides owned a home, their parents both sides owned a home. Now we're going back into the early 1900s and we're owning homes.
Wow.
Do you see?
Yeah.
That is long-lasting generational economic impact to my benefit.
Right.
It's not my fault. I didn't cause it, but I certainly benefited from it.
But, and then that's where it comes as an individual. Let's say my son buys a home and forecloses it before the age of 30. Somebody like you just randomly could look at that and be like, see? Can't even... Just the lack of, like, generational support and knowledge, etc. You're just barely catching up, like, in terms of centuries and generations. So that's the stuff, like you said, where it may be unintentional racism, and it's just a matter of, like you said, sitting with people, learning history, listening to stuff, podcasts. I have to do that. For example, with the history of Chinese and Japanese in the United States, I'm clueless. So I'm not saying it's just a black-white thing. I think we all have to get to the point, like one of the texters this morning, where we say, Lord, open my eyes. I want to learn more because I didn't even live in that reality.
Michelle brought up a good point. Don't confuse racism with generational poverty. That is colorless.
Right.
Yes, it is colorless, but it also is colorful.
Yeah.
Okay, so
Yeah.
here's what I mean.
Yeah.
There's absolutely generations of white people who can go back and talk about lack of home ownership because of generational poverty. Yes. But without a doubt, it was systemic for all African Americans for much longer. The possibility didn't exist.
Right.
So you're right. In one sense, it's colorless, and in another sense, it is. It is an issue.
Right. And yes, Mike, it's definitely, he says it's definitely harder for Black America, but God is still bigger than that and is in control. Absolutely. My family's an example of this, and we don't let that limit us, but we have to be aware. We have to be aware of it so we can better empower our kids. You can't navigate those things blindly. You
Right.
know, we have to tell our kids the reality.
Michelle's follow-up is my favorite, by the way. Great point, Brian. No, your point is
Michelle!
great. Your point is
Man,
great,
we
Michelle.
saw a lot of new names. You guys are awesome.
You guys are
Martina, Gary, we haven't seen you in a while.
Wow.
Quantaya, where have you been? And where are you
I
now?
thought she forgot about us.
Yeah.
Just saying.
Rachel, Tanks is always representing.
Yeah.
Lori, Robert, a new Robert, Brian. Charles, man, Roxanne, I haven't seen your name in a while.
Hey.
Aw. You guys
Turn
are
on the
awesome.
red.
You guys are the best.
Oh, you better turn on the red light.
I wasn't going to go
Roxanne.
there.
So, what are your plans in this hot weekend?
Oh, my wife's here. Whoa. Shape up.
Sarah.
Woo!
That's
Girl.
My
right.
wife, ladies and gentlemen. My
Yeah.
wife. Watch her be like, Sarah left. That's what's going to happen. Look, we can talk about this stuff.
Yeah, it's not too bad. It's not too bad.
God calls us to a higher standard, to listen to and hear each other. This has been interesting. And this is why I saw some people throughout this sharing this conversation. If you've wanted to talk like this and you can't, or you don't know how, hit share. Share this with your friends on Facebook. Maybe it'll enable us to spread this kind of discussion.
Yeah, that we have to have in
We
the
have
body.
to.
Yeah, the body of Christ. Tank says,
Dude,
why can't he get a top fan badge? Like, what's up with
I
that?
don't know. I guess you're not saying enough, Tanks.
Yeah.
It's today. It's hilarious.
Go through and like everybody's comments, and then reply to a few of them. You'll be there.
You got to talk before we go. You got to answer this one. It's good.
So Yvonne says, I'm clueless on what is appropriate when referring to individuals who are Spanish speaking. I've subbed in integrated classrooms and kids have called me racist for saying Latino, Hispanic, or Spanish people. So I would definitely say listen, I have used all three of those and have been called that, and it's not a thing for me. But it's not a thing. So, but definitely not Spanish.
Yeah, don't say
Spanish is
Spanish.
that's from
There's
Spain.
only one kind of person who's Spanish, and there are people who are literally from Spain.
From Spain. We speak Spanish, but we're not Spanish. Latino versus Hispanic, my experience has been, although I don't care about either one, people, for good reasons, prefer Latino. And actually, Latinx is becoming a thing so that you don't have to say Latino or Latina.
Because why should I not call you Latino?
You can call me Latino.
No, but why shouldn't I?
What do you mean?
It should be
masculine.
Latina.
I mean,
No.
Latina, but
Yeah, you
And
can.
that's where someone would get mad, because Latino refers to a
male. And-
Latina.
It's a female, and so if you say Latinx, it's everyone. But if you're gonna pick one, do Latino or Latinx.
or Latina, depending on who you're talking
Latina,
to.
yeah.
But now we have a mutual friend who hates the word Hispanic,
Yeah.
and his responses are he's Mexican.
Yeah.
And his response is always, "I'm sorry, where's Hispania?"
That's true.
There's a place
Hispaniola.
called Hispaniola, which you're from,
What's up, Dominicans?
but so are
It's like
Haitians,
just
by the
me.
way. It's the
Yeah,
whole island.
the
of
whole
Hispania.
island. Yeah.
But so he goes, "Don't call me Hispanic because I'm not from Hispania."
Yeah, there is no Hispanic. But
Aren't
so yeah,
you just being
Latino.
sensitive? Somebody would say.
I think so. I think it's like I'm not into labels. Like, for example, even Lens, like Black, African American, same thing. But some people care about those labels. But the more
So ask
correct
people.
one is Latino. Yeah, you can just ask them, what do you prefer to be called?
And if they go, "I don't like that," go, "Oh, sorry. What do you want me to call you?" And then just call them that. What's the big deal,
That's true.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I often wonder, like, Caucasian, where that came from. Because I remember learning about the Caucasus Mountains.
Yeah, I'm not from
that
there.
kind of divided Europe and
Yeah.
Russia.
Or where's Caucasia?
Yeah.
Can we, before we leave, can we address Laura? She says, I miss listening to you all on the radio. I moved to Texas and can only listen online.
Aw.
So can we tell her we got something
Come
coming?
on.
You should hug Laura though.
Ay, Laura, ven, un abrazo.
Well, you're kind of short.
Laura, that's so cool. You still join us for overtime. You can download the Moody app
Yeah,
and
listen
listen to the whole show. And our podcast will be coming sometime this year. So you'll be able to hear the whole show whenever you want to.
Or at least parts of it.
Yeah.
Yeah, part of the show. Well, guys, we get to go out there in the hot weather. Mira, look at me giving her. Oh,
Look at how short you
oh
are.
my God.
Yeah, it is going to be hot. Make sure
Yeah.
you stay refreshed. Hydrating
Hydrated.
with water, the best choice.
There you
Don't
go.
drink a
Yeah.
lot of juice and soda pop or
You know.
anything.
My
Water.
kids.
Clear water.
Yeah, there you go.
That's your best.
And AC is a good thing too.
Yes, yeah.
Go see a movie. Go shopping.
Yes.
Just walk around the mall so
I
you
like
get
shopping.
exercise.
That's
What is
right.
Tanks doing now? Tanks, now you're trying to be top.
Shout out to
fan.
my wife.
That's
Top
it. That's
fan.
how you do it, buddy.
Bye.
Bye, guys.
See ya. It's